It's 20 years since the Governor-General sacked Gough Whitlam. For many of those caught up in our greatest constitutional crisis, the time has finally come to tell it how it was.
If I had removed the Governor-General surreptitiously, I'd be as popular and respected as Kerr became for removing me surreptitiously.
Good evening and welcome to Four Corners. In tonight's program, Gough Whitlam, Malcolm Fraser and other key players revisit the 1975 dismissal in a spirit of remarkable candour. We hear for the first time just how much Malcolm Fraser knew in advance and just how little Whitlam saw it coming. There's nothing quite as fascinating as the big moments in history as revealed from the mouths of the players themselves. Not just the facts, but the underlying strategies, the motivations, the doubts and deceptions. Our guest reporter is Editor-in-Chief of the Australian newspaper, Paul Kelly, and author of a new book, November 1975.
The Governor-General may dissolve the Senate and the House of Representatives simultaneously.
He was a battle between Fraser and Whitlam. It was a battle of two men of huge ego and two great power seekers. They were jousting, or they were plunging at each other in the arena, mounted on their war horses, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party.
Well, of course it was a grab for power. It was just political thuggery.
Now, therefore, I, Sir John Robert Kerr, the Governor-General of Australia, do by this my proclamation dissolve the Senate and the House of Representatives. Given under my hand and the Great Seal of Australia on the 11th of November 1975 by His Excellency's command, Malcolm Fraser, Prime Minister, John R. Kerr, Governor-General. God save the Queen.
Say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General. The proclamation which you have just heard read by the Governor-General's official secretary was countersigned Malcolm Fraser.
How do you think the Liberal Party looks on November 1975 today?
They ought to look upon us as a matter of pride.
Nobody trusted Kerr. He acted dishonourably and deceptively.
These extraordinary events of 1975 started and finished here in the Senate. It was a battle between the Labor government led by Gough Whitlam that dominated the House of Representatives and the opposition led by Malcolm Fraser that controlled the Senate. Fraser blocked the budget, demanding an election, but Whitlam, determined to stay in office, defied the Senate. The climax came when the Governor-General, Sir John Kerr, dismissed Whitlam, forcing an election. As a journalist, I covered the crisis, talking to both Whitlam and Fraser. What I learnt was that 1975 was more than a constitutional crisis. It was a personal and psychological battle between three proud and ruthless men.
It's time for children. It's time to teach them. It's time. It was free. Yes, it's time. It's time to love it. It's
Whitlam came to power in 1972, a self-styled man of destiny, determined to change Australia's direction after 23 years of coalition rule. But Whitlam was a flawed hero.
He had his head in the clouds. He had great dreams of making Australia a more civilised place, some of which he succeeded in doing. But I don't think he was ever the rough, tough politician that is called for in the hurly-burly of Australian politics.
Gough was a man in such a hurry. We all recall he couldn't even wait to have a proper ministry. He and Lance Barnard had to be the duo that ran everything. They kept falling over themselves. And it was a heaven-sent opportunity for an opposition.
If you become leader, will you be looking for an early election?
Well, one of the things, if I was leader, that I would certainly not want to do is to give the Prime Minister, Mr. Whitlam, any indication when an election might occur. I'd want to keep that knowledge buttoned up and catch him one day with his pants well and truly down.
In March 1975, Malcolm Fraser became Liberal Party leader after a party room coup. Fraser, as tall as Whitlam, was thick-set, cunning and lethal. Convinced of the superiority of the Liberals as Australia's ruling party, Fraser was searching for an early election.
All those for an election, all those who want Mr. Whitlam to get the hell out of Canberra.
It was a Balmain-born son of a boilermaker, John Kerr, a brilliant student, a Labor Party member, barrister and Chief Justice of New South Wales, who was Whitlam's choice as Governor-General. The Labor Party saw this office as purely ceremonial, but it would fall to Kerr to arbitrate the looming crisis.
Yes, I think there are many things that we have to do.
Whitlam thought he knew Kerr, but right from the start, he misjudged his man.
John had aspired at one stage to move into politics, and as a matter of fact, most people thought he would go into politics. In fact, there were some who thought he'd become Prime Minister. He took the job when it was offered essentially because he always wanted to be at the centre of where things were really moving, the centre of power in Canberra.
Well, he was a gregarious man, highly intelligent, and generally a likeable man. I was very fond of him.
I think he was a man who regarded his own importance very highly. I've used the words, I think he suffered, or had, folie de grandeur.
And I think once he became Governor-General, he thought, especially in the state of crisis, here was his chance to show Whitlam who was number one, who was running the country.
When Whitlam appointed Kerr Governor-General, there was one issue they never discussed: the powers of the office. Whitlam believed the Governor-General could act only on ministerial advice, but Kerr had a different view.
Gough believed that in all things the Governor-General and John Kerr, as Gough's man, would have to do what Gough Whitlam advised or told him to do. Gough did not believe that the Governor-General, or the office of Governor-General, had, at the last resort, an independent capacity.
Convention says that a Governor-General acts on ministerial advice. But there's a quaint exception to this rule. It's when a Queen or Governor-General calls upon the reserve powers to resolve a crisis. These powers, often called the royal prerogative, can be exercised without ministerial advice or even against the advice of ministers. Sir John Kerr had a fascination with these powers, and he was certainly prepared to use them.
Now, don't sell the United Nations short. Stick up.
The former leader of the Labor Party, Dr. Evatt, had been a patron of the young John Kerr. Both men were influenced by the dismissal in 1932 of the Labor Premier of New South Wales, Jack Lang, by the Governor, Sir Philip Game. Evatt was prompted to write a famous book, The King and His Dominion Governors, which accepted that a Governor-General had the power to dismiss a government.
John was talking to Evatt a great deal about the reserve powers, about how much of the reserve powers had survived in Australia, what they were, how they could be exercised, so that he became very closely interested in the reserve powers from very early in his career.
The seeds of the 1975 crisis lay in events which occurred at the Lodge a year before, Black Friday, the 13th of December, 1974. An Executive Council meeting was held to approve a loan authority of $4 billion for Minerals Minister Rex Connor. The Governor-General, who must sign all executive decisions, was not contacted before this crucial meeting, and his approval did not occur until the next day. The loans affair was born.
I phoned him. It was a Friday night, I think, wasn't it? A Friday night. And I was leaving for overseas the Saturday afternoon following. And so I rang him at Kirribilli House. And they said, oh, he's gone to the ballet. He was at the ballet. Romeo and Juliet with the new bride. And so I said to the staff there, I said, well, when do you expect him back? And they said, oh, well, usually doesn't like being disturbed when he comes back from functions at night. I said, well, you always take a cup of tea into him first thing in the morning, I believe, about 6 o'clock. I said, would you tell him, or tell me, when you've taken the cup of tea in, because I'll then ring him. And I did.
John was at the Opera House on that particular night and wasn't even told that the Executive Council was to meet. First of all, he thought it might have been an accident, some bit of a bungle on the part of some of the bureaucratic people who had to organise it. But it soon became apparent to John that he had been deliberately not told about the meeting and therefore wasn't there. And that, I think it would be too strong a word to say that caused him to become suspicious of Gough, but it caused him to have a sort of uneasiness about Gough.
It's true the Governor-General was concerned about that first